In 1949, the United States government made a secret deal. They had just finished prosecuting Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg. The world was watching. Justice, they said, was being served. But at the exact same moment, half a world away, American officials were sitting across a table from men who had done something arguably worse. Men who had performed live surgeries on prisoners without anesthesia. Men who had deliberately infected human beings with plague, cholera, and anthrax. Men who had frozen children alive to study frostbite. Men who had killed over 300,000 people. And America's offer to these men was not a prison cell. It was immunity. This is the story of Unit 731 and the deal that buried it. In 1932, the Japanese Imperial Army established a covert biological and chemical warfare research unit in Manchuria, China. It was officially called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. But inside classified documents, it had another name, Unit 731. Its commander was Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, a doctor, a scientist, and by any definition, a monster. Ishii had a simple and terrifying philosophy. The fastest way to advance medical science was to experiment on living human beings. And in Manchuria, far from international scrutiny, he had an unlimited supply. The facility was massive, over 150 buildings spread across 6 square kilometers. It employed over 3,000 researchers, doctors, and technicians at its peak. From the outside, it looked like an industrial complex. From the inside, it was a death factory. The prisoners sent to Unit 731 were given a name by their captors, Maruta. It means logs. They were not considered human. They were research material. The experiments conducted at Unit 731 defy description, but they must be described because they were covered up for decades. Prisoners were infected with bubonic plague, typhoid, cholera, anthrax, and dozens of other pathogens, deliberately, systematically, to study how the diseases progressed. They were subjected to vivisection, live surgery without anesthesia, so that researchers could study organs in their living state. They were placed in pressure chambers until their eyes burst from their sockets. They were frozen alive in sub-zero temperatures, limbs submerged in water, to study the progression of frostbite and the limits of human endurance. They were spun in centrifuges at lethal speeds. They were exposed to lethal doses of X-ray radiation. Women were deliberately impregnated and infected with syphilis to study congenital transmission. No prisoner who entered Unit 731 for experimentation ever left alive. Estimates of the total death toll range from 200,000 to over 300,000. The vast majority of them Chinese civilians, along with Soviet, Korean, Mongolian, and Allied prisoners of war. This was not fringe science conducted by rogue actors. This was a systematic, government-funded, military-directed program of mass murder disguised as research. In August 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and began advancing rapidly into Manchuria. Ishii received orders: destroy everything. Unit 731's personnel worked frantically. They dynamited the main complex. They incinerated documents. They executed the remaining prisoners, shooting them, beheading them, releasing plague-infected fleas into their cells. Then they fled. When Soviet forces arrived, they found ruins, but not complete destruction. Enough survived to piece together what had happened. The Soviets captured some Unit 731 personnel and put them on trial in 1949, the Khabarovsk war crimes trial. 12 members were convicted and sentenced to hard labor. But the Americans had a different plan. General Douglas MacArthur's occupation forces in Japan had already made contact with Shiro Ishii and his senior researchers, and they had made them an offer. The American offer was straightforward. Hand over all your research data, every experiment, every result, every death, all of it. In exchange, complete immunity from war crimes prosecution. Ishii and his colleagues accepted. The data they handed over was extensive. Years of biological weapons research conducted on human subjects that could never be ethically replicated. Information on how plague spread through populations, how cholera could be weaponized, how frostbite destroyed tissue, how the human body responded to extremes that no laboratory ethics board would ever permit. For the United States Army, this data was invaluable. The Cold War had begun. The Soviet Union was developing its own biological weapons program. The Americans needed to catch up, or at minimum, understand what they were up against. The decision was made at the highest levels. MacArthur himself approved it. The Joint Chiefs of Staff were informed. The deal was classified. It would remain classified for decades. Shiro Ishii, commander of a program that killed hundreds of thousands, lived out the rest of his life in Tokyo as a free man. He died in 1959 of throat cancer. He was never charged with a single crime. The United States government did not merely let war criminals go free. It actively buried the evidence. When the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal was convened, the Pacific equivalent of Nuremberg, Unit 731 was conspicuously absent from the proceedings. American prosecutors had the evidence. They had testimony. They had Ishii's own researchers sitting in occupied Japan, fully accessible. But the decision had already been made. Unit 731 would not be prosecuted. The official American position, maintained for decades, was that there was insufficient evidence to bring charges. This was a lie. Declassified documents released in the 1980s and 1990s, under pressure from historians and journalists, confirmed what had long been suspected. The immunity deal was real. The research data was transferred, and the cover-up was deliberate. American military scientists used the Unit 731 data in their own biological weapons research programs throughout the Cold War. The victims, hundreds of thousands of people who had been experimented on and killed, never received acknowledgement, never received an apology, never received justice. China formally requested a Japanese apology for Unit 731 as recently as 2018. It has never come. The story of Unit 731 raises a question that historians and ethicists have debated ever since. Was the deal worth it? The United States government's answer, implicit in its actions, was yes. The research data was militarily valuable. The Cold War demanded hard choices, pragmatism over principle. But consider what was traded. 300,000 lives, no accountability, no justice, no warning to the world about what had been done. The scientists who committed these atrocities were protected. Their research was used. Their crimes were erased from the official record. Unit 731 is not a footnote in history. It is one of the largest organized programs of human experimentation ever conducted, on par with, and in some respects exceeding, the medical experiments of the Nazi regime. The difference is that the Nazi doctors were tried at Nuremberg. The doctors of Unit 731 were given immunity, and their data. The full truth about Unit 731 only began to emerge in the 1980s, when Japanese journalist Shiro Morimura published his investigation, and when American archives were slowly, partially declassified. Even today, key documents remain classified or have been destroyed. The deal between the United States and Unit 731 is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented history, confirmed by declassified government records, academic research, and the testimony of survivors. It happened. It was covered up, and the people responsible died free. If this is the kind of history you want to understand, subscribe. There is much more that has been buried. There are more files that were never meant to be opened. Subscribe, and we'll open them together.